Fear of death is part of the reason why humans have existed as long as we have. That thing that tells you not to keep walking when you get toward a cliff, or if you see a dangerous animal coming to run, that's the fear of death kicking in. It's a survival instinct. So it's totally normal. Where it becomes challenging is when it gets in the way of us living authentically, and it gets in the way of us being able to engage with life fully.
I'm Lily Cornell Silver, and welcome to Mind Wide Open, my mental health focused interview series. Today, I am talking to Alua Arthur, who is a death doula as well as a minister, professor, and attorney. She is also the founder of Going with Grace, which offers support, services, and classes for end-of-life planning. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy. Hi, Alua. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Lily. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so excited to talk to you. I would love to start just by the baseline. I think there's probably a lot of people watching that don't know what a death doula is or didn't know that you could be a death doula or what that means. So tell us what that looks like on a day-to-day for you.
Sure. So big picture, a death doula is somebody who does all of the non-medical and holistic caregiving and support of the dying person and the family through the process. So that looks like a number of things, from emotional support, helping people reconcile their emotions around dying, work through their relationships around death, to spiritual questions about the afterlife, if there is any at all, but just getting clear on what their beliefs are, practical things like getting their affairs in order, and also just logistical things like organizing who's bringing food and what to do with the car and stuff of that sort. So a death doula is really a supportive person who walks people through the end of life and the family.
So you do a lot. I mean, that's a ton. That's a ton for one person, but it also sounds really specific to the person that you're working with, because obviously everyone has very, very different belief systems when it comes to what happens in the afterlife and how they want to feel. So how do you navigate people maybe with very different, belief systems in your own, or what does that look like for you?
Well, it's our job to stay as neutral as possible to allow the person who's dying to have their own belief system. So I'm just here to help people sort through whatever's coming up for them and help them get a little bit more clear as best as they can, or just even be a bouncing off place for ideas and questions. Some people want to talk about it, but other people don't at all. And for the people that don't want to talk about it, that's just fine. The doula's job is just to meet people where they are, to offer them support where they are. I think people often think that my job is to help people get comfortable with dying or bring people into acceptance of the fact that they're dying. And that's not remotely it. It's just to be of support where they are and what they need support with,
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
No, it makes complete sense. And it's because it's such a subjective subject. I would imagine that anyone that you work with could be on total opposite ends of the spectrum on any given day, any given month. So that neutrality seems like it would be vital to be able to do this job.
Necessary. And also constantly checking in with our own personal relationship and our feelings about death so that I'm not putting it on other people. If I end up working with, let's say, a Black woman in her mid-40s who is of a certain education status or something like that, I might collapse our two experiences and think that she has some of the fears that I do, which means that I'm going to be trying to support her for what I think she needs rather than just showing up to support her for what she actually needs. Right. So death doulas constantly need to do the work around our personal relationship with death. It doesn't mean that we can't be afraid of dying. It doesn't mean that we can't have our own sticking points. We just need to be aware of it so that we're not spilling it out on somebody else.
Right. Absolutely. I think about that a little bit when it comes to this series for me. And, I got involved in mental health advocacy because I struggle with my mental health and because that's something that I'm passionate about. So I'm wondering if you got involved in this work because that's something that touched you personally, death and dying touched you personally, and how you navigate that.
Oh, Lily, what a great question. So I'm a lawyer by training.
Wow.
I practiced law for 10 years. I worked at Legal Aid. So it's feel good law stuff, but still something wasn't all the way right. And it manifested in a very severe clinical depression where I took a leave of absence from work. I couldn't manage to get myself up and dressed and eating food and listening to clients and filling out documents. If you've ever had a serious depression, you know how emptying it can be. And I had nothing left for anybody. I had very little left for myself even. even. And during that time, during my leave of absence, I traveled to Cuba and I met a woman on a bus who had uterine cancer, a fellow traveler. And we talked a lot about her disease. And I asked her, I mean, I was stunned. Like, I hadn't known anybody around my age who had died. You know, there had been a guy in high school when I was 17, but I wasn't close to him. And so it had never directly impacted my life. And this is the first person who was around my age. And we talked a lot about her death. And I asked if this disease were it for her life. If this disease is the thing that killed her, what would still be undone? Like, what would she have made of her life if this was going to be it? And I should have been asking myself those same questions, but I hadn't. And thinking about my life and what it had been thus far, I wasn't feeling complete. I hadn't felt like I'd used up what I'd been given when I came to Earth. And so I wanted to do something that felt like it was in contribution in a meaningful way. And, depression had made it such that I was living completely out of alignment with every part of myself. Like I couldn't find my way back to my center. But through that conversation and also through the help of tremendous therapy and taking good time off of work, I was able to start trying to imagine what life could be like for me again, a life that I felt really engaged with. Mm-hmm. And sitting on the bus with this woman talking about her death was the first time in a long time that I felt, that spark of life again in my body. I leaned into the conversation, like my eyes were open, my heart was beating fast, I was breathing deeply. I was like, yes, there is some juice here. Let's have this conversation. And also started to realize that people aren't having it. And so that conversation, that brush with death wasn't mine directly, although I had almost been hit by a car earlier that day, but that was the way that I know. Right. I know. Here's a really wild bit is that the car that had almost hit me, she was in that car, this woman that I ended up talking to on the bus. And I didn't know when we were talking about it.
So you were really meant to, the universe was going to make sure you met her in some way.
Let me tell you, on all the days when I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, why do I just talk about death all the time? It's so weird. I remember that I really have no choice. Like I was on a crash course with this work anyway. So that's how the work came to pass. And I got really intensely focused on it because I felt alive again for the first time in a really long time. Wow. And so I threw myself into it. And then not long after that, my brother-in-law, Peter St. John, got sick. Mm-hmm. And then about 4 months later, he was dying. So I packed up my bags and went to New York and got to be with him and my sister and my niece during the end of his life. And that's where all the ideas I had about on the bus with this fellow traveler became real. And the company I run that trains death doulas, Going with Grace, was born right after that.
Beautiful. Yeah. That's amazing. And I think about, my own experiences with bouts of depression and how in those times you desperately want to feel that spark. You want to feel something, but there is something so out of alignment. Like no matter what you do, you don't have the energy. I mean, that's been my experience. I didn't have the energy to put it towards anything. And so to find something that gives you that spark is so important. And I'm wondering how you take care of yourself on a day-to-day basis when it comes to engaging in this work. Like my first interview that I did was with this amazing woman and one of my close friends, Laura Lipsky, who's a trauma expert. And she's really open about, she works in trauma stewardship. And there was a point at the beginning of her career where she almost had like a mental break because she was putting so much of herself into this work that personally affected her because it's around trauma. And so now it's a matter of her like making sure that she's able to help others and take care of herself. So what does that look like for you?
Well, I'm happy you asked. I just came back from Puerto Rico. I had a birthday on Saturday.
And happy birthday.
Thank you. 10 of like my best friends from different points in my life were there. Wow. And for 5 days, we ate delicious food and danced and drank and laughed, so many laughs, and stared out at nature and felt really grateful for the gifts of both life, but also the gift of love to be really seen by other people who I've allowed to see me. I think one of the ways that I do my best to take care of myself is staying vulnerable and not pretending like I've got it all together, because I can do that really easily. So staying vulnerable is one way, allowing myself to be loved, receiving love. And then, also playing constantly with my shadow side, recognizing when I am behaving out of some stories that say that I'm not good enough or not worthy, or, I'm not loved or something. And paying attention to those conversations and shutting them down as much as possible, interrupting them, I'd say. Then also the other things like, I went on a bike ride by the beach this morning. I have a team that handles all the operations at work, so I can write in my journal and stare out the window, because staring out the window is one of my favorite life activities. I think it's a very good use of time. I take naps. I eat potato chips. I take naps, good stuff. Drink water.
All the good stuff.
People that feel good to my spirit.
Right.
Yeah.
So checking in with yourself. Amazing. And you're also a professor and a minister. Does that kind of fill your cup in the same way? Is that does that ignite that spark for you as well?
What really fills up my cup is when with death doula students, they come and they think that I'm teaching them, but we are all equally teacher and student. I learn so much from them. They are constantly inspiring me because they're coming from their own perspectives and ideas about these things that I spend a lot of time thinking about, but I don't know everything. I barely know anything at all. And so it's so wonderful to be in the company of people that have this fresh energy and excitement about it and want to learn and have questions, and that's really inspiring. And also therapy. Let's not forget therapy. I'm talking to my therapist in an hour.
We're very pro therapy on this show. It's definitely I literally cannot get through an episode without being like, my therapist told me this.
My therapist said, I feel so annoying every time I say it, but it's true.
It's so true.
So helpful.
So your mission statement for your company, Going with Grace, is what must I do to be at peace with myself so that I may die gracefully? And as we talked about, that obviously looks different for everybody and is such a subjective thing. Do you have an answer for that yourself? What does that look like for you?
Ooh, yeah. So the question is twofold. It's what must I do to be at peace with myself so that I may live presently also and die gracefully, because the two to me go hand in hand. And for this birthday, I spent a lot of time in contemplation because my brother-in-law was 43 when he died, and I just turned 43. And so I was thinking about my life through the lens of his. He never saw 44. If this were actually it, if I had, just a year left to go, am I pleased with the choices that I've made? Am I at peace with the person I've become? Have I said the things that I wanted to say? Have I made my apologies? Have I gotten as much as I could out of this life? And today, gratefully, I can say the answer is yes. There's one other thing that I need to do. But other than that, I feel like I've done it. I feel really pleased. In the height of my depression, I definitely couldn't say yes.
And when it comes to, feeling fulfilled in the life that you're living and feeling in the present moment, in my own struggles with things like anxiety and things like depression and PTSD, that can be one of the things that I struggle with the most, is feeling guilty almost, or really frustrated that I know that I want to be living this life, and I feel like I'm being hindered by these periods of struggling with mental health, especially with anxiety, which is kind of an ongoing thing for me. So I'm wondering if you have any words of wisdom for people who want to feel that way, but can sometimes mental health can be an impeding factor in feeling that fulfillment.
The only thing I can really think of is to allow ourselves grace to be human, to allow ourselves grace to struggle. I don't wake up every day this is it, I'm killing it. Most of the time I don't, most of the time I don't. But I think I allow myself space to mess it up and to feel anxious about something and to turn that one thing I did over and over and over again in my head. I always say this, that the question that I ask myself far more than am I bored or am I hungry, because I ask myself that question all the time, is am I doing this right? Did I do it wrong? Did I do it right? Maybe I should have done this. Maybe I should have done that. When I can remember that I'm human. Right. Nobody's ever expecting that I get it right. I can give myself some grace to do it wrong if be, but also to recognize that this human ride means just being on a ride. It doesn't have to look a particular way. It can't look a particular way. It's not going to. My depression was just as valuable as the times where I feel healthy. And that, any times when I struggle is really just a part of what it is to actually be human.
Right.
We can't fix death. We can't make it go away. We can't fix grieving. We can't there's no magic pill or solution or like book that you read and everything is better all of a sudden. Like we just have to be with it. This is part of the work I was explaining to you. My job is just to meet people where they are. I have nothing to fix. I don't have to make it better. How can I show up for myself in a way that I can also just acknowledge that it is what it is right now? It won't always be this way, because we also know everything is temporary. It won't always be this way, but this is just what it is right now. I don't have to try to fix it. I still struggle, I wake up mornings and, some mornings I feel like a hint of that emptiness again. And I'm like, oh God, please tell me it's not that depression coming back. Like, please God. But I'm like, well, what if it was? What if it was? Like, I survived it once. It was tough. And I was deeply depressed for a while, but I worked my way through, and I'll do it again if that's what happens.
I'll bring up something that my therapist said, which is that it was my therapist, but also David Kessler, who does, he's a grief expert and he's so amazing. And I actually got to have him on the show. And he talks about how not all grief is traumatic, but all trauma has an element of grief. And I'm wondering how that comes into your work, if you ever work with people where there's traumatic grief involved in their loss.
Yeah. Being with people that have experienced a traumatic loss is incredibly difficult because, I'm used to working with people that have some awareness that death is coming. Death doulas often show up at the end of illness, right. or we're helping healthy people plan for the end of their lives when they're still healthy and they have a ways to go, but they just want to get themselves ready. And so when the death has been sudden and there's been no planning done and nobody was prepared for it, it's a whole new event because now we're processing over and over again the moment that it happened, how you learned, the fact that it's happened, remembering every morning. And it's like layered. It's a lot of layers of trauma and a lot of layers of grief that I'm used to looking at it through a particular lens. When it's traumatic, there's just different angles for it that needs a lot of support, community support, and also I think professional support through grief therapists.
What would you say to someone, whether they're healthy or whether they're on their deathbed even, that maybe has fear around death, or that's something that like they can't, like this conversation would make them really uncomfortable, like that kind of, thing, like that taught fear and that taught stigma around what death is? Yeah,
first of all, it's totally normal. It's completely normal. Fear of death is part of the reason why humans have existed as long as we have. Right. That thing that tells you not to keep walking when you get toward a cliff, or if you see a dangerous animal coming to run, that's the fear of death kicking in. It's a survival instinct. So it's totally normal. Where it becomes challenging is when it gets in the way of us living authentically, and it gets in the way of us being able to engage with life fully. I'm not going to do these things because I'm afraid I might die, or we get paralyzed by anxiety around it. I have this small exercise that I encourage people to do. It's a teeny tiny one. It can be very confronting, but to go to the mirror and look at yourself in the mirror, like look deep into the eyes of the thing that's looking and look at the thing looking back at you, and just say to yourself, I am going to die. You might seize up everywhere, but you might also find yourself being like, oh, right. Now, why am I so stressed out about my boss? Or the shoe that my kid left in the hallway, or the dishes that I didn't do last night? I'm going to die. I'm going to die. It has the capacity to unlock our authenticity, but we have to be willing to let it. And if you fear that, it's normal.
Right. And that idea of thinking about all those things while you are still healthy, I feel like people often don't go that in depth when they are still healthy, because it can be regarded as like, that's like kind of a weird thing to do, or like that's like kind of a cynical thing to do, is to focus so much on end of life, but it really helps people. Like it's a really helpful exercise versus one that kind of puts you in a dark headspace.
Yeah. Life and death are just two sides of the same coin. Thinking about death impacts my life. Thinking about my life means I'm also actually thinking about my death. Because one day, none of this will be available to me anymore. It's available now because I live. When I die, it won't be. So let me make as full use of it as possible. This kind of goes back to what I was talking about before about like, in the middle of my depression, when I was not filling up my body, like I was just barely in there. Like, I wasn't capable of like, being in life. And now I have such gratitude for that experience because I know what it feels like to be completely empty.
Right.
And so I'm aware of what it feels like to also be like living authentically and fully.
That's such an incredible thing. And I think about the stigma around mental health. What I always say is like the stigma makes no sense to me because it's something that everyone deals with at some point. But I think one of the only things that really everyone deals with more than mental health is dying. Everyone dies at some point. Everyone knows someone that dies. So the work that you do around like that in and of itself sheds the stigma, but also helps people prepare for it, I think is so incredible.
Thank you. I'm pretty into it myself.
I would love to know, what is something that is giving you hope right now?
That's a good question. The fact that the sun comes up every day gives me hope. Yeah, it hasn't not done that since it started doing that. And it just reminds me that this is also like cyclical in nature and that there'll be a tomorrow until there isn't, but that it's just like it's just going to keep going. Nothing is the same. The sun is never in the same position in the sky. It's constantly moving and all of this is temporary. When something is difficult or even when something feels good, it's temporary, like the sun is moving. But it gives me hope because it reminds me that the thing that whatever the thing is going to shift at some point. My niece, who's 12, she gives me a lot of hope. The way that she talks about, she gave me a whole lecture the other day on the difference between bi, pan, and omnisexual. I did not even know omni existed, but she gives me a lot of hope for what future generations will do in terms of allowing people to be exactly who they are. You know, they are already making such leaps and bounds, far more than I think my generation was able to, and certainly more than the generation before me. So I hope that we continue to go in that direction when people can just be who and how they are. That gives me a lot of hope. Love always gives me hope. Love always gives me hope. It gives me something to continue living and striving and working for. I really think that the essence of my work is love in and of itself, loving this human ride for exactly what it is. It's like the roller coaster of it all, and also the fact that it comes to an end.
Beautiful. This has been so profound and so important for me, this interview. So thank you so much for making the time.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was so fun to talk to you.
If you like this episode, please subscribe in Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leave us a review.